Hi BookTube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing okay. Today I'm going to be doing the I'm So Annoyed BookTube tag. It's a tag that's been created by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, and she was inspired to make this when she was watching a video by Melinda from A Web of Stories, and she then sort of weaponized it in the kind of Steve Donahue-esque kind of way into a tag video. And so it's not about being annoyed with BookTube, but rather it's sharing the bookish things that annoy you with BookTube. I was very kindly tagged to do this by Will Chambers, and he's one of a couple of people so far that I've seen who have done this. So I'm hoping a few other people would do it because I've been finding it a lot of fun to see what annoys people. Um, there are, I think, 10 prompts, so I'll get started. The first prompt is, do publishers ever do things that you find annoying? Share an example. I suppose one thing I do find a little annoying, it's a lot of these are very small annoyances. They don't keep me up at night. But it's when if you buy or are given a box set or like a package, and it's like a series or a collection or something like that, and so you expect the books to match and they don't. Um, so I've got an example here. So this is Mortal Engines by Philip Reeve. I was given the whole series as a box set when I was, I don't know how old, probably about 10 or maybe a bit older. And the rest of the series, has similar, really, really cool, really lovely cover art. That's the second one, Predator's Gold. We've got Infernal Devices, and then the last book is a Darkling Plane. So going off the covers, they don't look that different, but when you put them together as a series, and you look at the spines, you can see that the third book, Infernal Devices, has a totally different spine, and actually there is a slight difference in the cover as well. So even though the artwork is similar, and the sort of typeface that they're using is similar, you can see that it's not as shiny. The title of Mortal Engines is shiny, and the rest of them are shiny. This one is not shiny, and the spine is different, and yet they came together. They weren't in a box set, I don't think. I think they were, but they were all together in like a shrink wrap. And so I'm just really curious as to why these books don't match. And like the last book shares the format of the first two, and so it's not that they just changed it. So it's a mystery that I'll never find out. But yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. Then next up, number 2, have you ever been annoyed by a spoiler? Even something as simple as somebody telling you that there's a great twist. And not really. A lot of people, say not to read introductions to certain classics because it will spoil the story, and things like that. I don't get too annoyed by spoilers. Sometimes I'm quite relieved if I hear a spoiler, um, and it might sound a bit weird, but sometimes the plot of a book can kind of get in the way of me enjoying the book, um, which is kind of why I often prefer a book the second time round for a reread, is because I kind of have to get the scope of everything that's happening in my head and then kind of out of the way so I can enjoy everything else that's going on. And so you could say I read for plot, but mainly on the first time around. And then from then on, it's just trying to work out everything else with the characters and the ideas, and um, sort of noticing sort of less important characters and things like that. And so yeah, sometimes feel relieved if someone does reveal a spoiler or just tells me the whole plot of a book before I've read it. I don't mind that too much. And also sometimes I won't really remember what they've said very well, or it's the context that actually makes it. So I might know this certain spoiler, but I don't really know what's around it, and so it's putting that event in context and experiencing it in context that makes it enjoyable for me. So again, I don't really mind them too much at all. Uh, Number three is, have you ever been annoyed by something you found in a little free library, a book sale, or a secondhand bookstore? Um, and I don't really think so. I found some non-bookish things that were a bit gross in some bookshops before. But in terms of books that have been left there and things like that, not really. It does stress me out a little bit when a little free library um, or even a secondhand bookshop, there's no organization. Books they're not even piled, they're spilling over and being bent and cracked and getting damaged, but there's also no organization. And I don't know, it just makes me a little sad, really. It makes me think that no one really sort of cares about this space. Nobody's really going to want to go in and sift through all this stuff. And so yeah, that makes me a little sad. Maybe it doesn't annoy me, but yeah, that's something I don't like to see. Number four, when it comes to short story collections, are you annoyed if there's a novella halfway through the collection? And not really. I've got a book here, and I suppose it doesn't really count because the novella is actually the first story in the collection, so it's not um, too much of a surprise. But this is The Imposter and Other Stories by Silvina Ocampo, a great Argentinian or Argentine short story writer. And the title story, The Imposter, is fairly long. How long is it? It's about okay, it's about 60 pages long, so it's not quite a full novella length story, but it's a fairly long short story. And for me, that I actually quite enjoyed that because you could sort of bask in this first story, get a real good flavour of um, of what this author's like, and it's not too long, so that if you're not entirely sure if you like them, it's not going to try your patience too much. And then there are then these shorter stories which are still great, they're just shorter. So I didn't mind that too much. Maybe it's slightly different if it comes like halfway through, but again, I don't mind it really that much. I've got a book that I want to get to, hopefully at some point this year. I've got these new selected stories by Thomas Mann, and I think there are about two sort of novella length stories in here. There's Death in Venice, which is about 100 pages long, maybe 90 pages long in here. And there's another couple of stories that are more than 50, sort of between 50 and 100 pages. And so again, I'm not daunted by that. I'm not annoyed by that. Um, I'm not really expecting my short stories to only be 10 or 20 pages long. Then number five is Deckled Edges, beautiful or annoying. I think deckled edges are beautiful. I wouldn't have them on every book. It's one of those things where it's just great to have something special and extra every now and then. I think my favourite book with deckled edges is this Penguin Deluxe edition of Sagas of the Icelanders, and it just feels lovely. It's just um, a lovely sort of tactile pleasure to reading a physical book that just makes it feel a little extra. And I'm really quite in the mood for reading some Icelandic sagas, so I'm hoping that Saga Long will happen this year. And I've actually got this is a book I really need to get to. This is A Life of William Shakespeare by Sir Sidney Lee. It's an old battered edition, and this is the pages haven't been cut on all of this, so this has sort of genuine, sort of old school deckled edges. Whoever owned this, they didn't read all of the introduction. There's still uncut pages here, although you have to cut them at the bottom there. And also towards the end, there are some uncut sections as well, so it'll just get more and more deckled as I get closer towards the end. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, at some point, it might be a fair bit in the future, just sort of cutting through this book as I get towards the end of it. And then we have got number 6, other people's annotations in a used or library book. Annoying, or are you okay with it? When it comes to a used book, I don't mind that too much. If it's something like this, I've got this anthology of transcendentalist writing, and there's just some bits where there are some notes there. So that's at the beginning of the introduction to something, and there's also there's something somewhere. There's yeah. Anyway, there are just certain parts where it's been annotated, and you can tell that whoever owned this just had this book for for a class on literature or philosophy or something. And I've just read the bits that they needed to and annotated them for an exam or an essay, and then they've sold the book on. And I don't mind that too much. It's not too intrusive. It's it's interesting to see what has stood out to other people, and it's not too obtrusive. And I don't mind it being in a book that I found in a secondhand bookshop. I do mind it a bit if I found that in a library book. And I think that's because if you're buying a secondhand book, you know what you're getting in for. And also, you don't have to buy the book. And I suppose with a library, you don't have to borrow the book, but you're kind of going to the library so you don't have to pay for books. And so it just seems a little disrespectful, maybe, to be scrolling over a book that isn't even yours. You're just borrowing it. That seems just a little, I don't know, just a little insensitive to uh, other readers who maybe don't have the means to be buying books and are maybe more dependent on libraries and things like that. So it does sadden me a bit to find a library book that's scrawled with annotations. Number 7 is if there's a series or a collection of certain kinds of books, say a certain imprint of books, and changes are then made, are you annoyed with it or are you okay with it? If yes, give examples. I've got one where I am kind of okay with a change that's been made, but I have an issue with this change because it hasn't been made fast enough, or it's only been partially made. And it's a new series that John Murray started doing, and it's these John Murray's Journeys. So my edition of A Time of Gifts by Patrick Leigh Fermor is in this series, and they've basically just decided to reprint certain sort of classics of travel writing that they have the rights to um, in this series of John Murray journeys. I actually noticed that the Shakespeare book I showed you, that old beat up one, is a much older John Murray's book, which is quite cool. But the thing is that I read this and really loved it, and then I wanted to buy the next books in the series. This is part of a trilogy, all published by John Murray, and this is the only one so far, or at least at the time of reading, um, that had been published in this series. And so then, because I knew that it was going to be a hodgepodge, I then just bought whatever editions I could get. So the second book I bought in the New York Review of Books edition because I quite like the New York Review of Books. And then this is the more sort of, I suppose this is what the rest of the John Murray editions would have looked like. They would have had this sort of artwork to them. And so when you're looking at my Patrick Leigh Fermor books, they all have totally different spines. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. I do prefer that to having something that's supposed to be a set and it doesn't match. Whereas this, I knew getting into it then that it wasn't going to be a matching set. But it does annoy me a little that they've only added the first book in a series to this collection, rather than just putting all three books in there, because it's a journey, and they've only included the first leg of the journey. Then number 8, do the decisions of characters in novels ever annoy you? If so, share a book and the decisions that you found annoying. Not really, I don't think. I mean, it can annoy me, but I can recognise that that it's intentionally annoying, and that I'm always still more intrigued to find out why the author has made that decision, rather than just throw the book across across the room. There might be some examples where it got a bit too much and I'm forgetting, but as far as I'm aware, that doesn't normally happen. Number 9 is, are you ever annoyed by how someone organises their books, and what do you find annoying? This kind of goes back to one of the earlier prompts. I do find it a little stressful if there's just no organisation at all to the books, because even if everything for me isn't alphabetical and split up by genre or whatever, I at least try to organise things enough that mentally I know where to find a book. And if there's just no organisation at all, um, it just stresses me out that you won't mentally uh, be able to remember where things are kept, if everything's just thrown together willy nilly. It kind of stresses me out. I've got just a little bookcase with a shelf just for books that don't have a home yet, that I haven't been able to work into the sort of the main organisation. Um, and even that stresses me out a little bit. So, I can't imagine what it would be like to have just no organisation at all. And then number 10 is just to share something bookish that you find annoying. I got two things. The first is hardback releases with new releases. Um, and then just the fact that it comes out as a hardback, and then 6 months or even a year later, um, that the paperback is released, and it's very obviously just a money grab, and that the people who really want to buy the book, as soon as it comes out, they're going to have to buy the um, the hardback. But I don't know. I just feel like potentially they could make way more money if they just released a paperback and had hardbacks for like special editions. I think in France, just hardbacks aren't really a thing. There might be special editions, but all new releases are paperback, which for me just makes a lot more sense. Um, so yeah, that's something that confounds me, and I suppose annoys me as well. Another thing, and this is something in books and in particularly in the the text and the writing of the books that annoys me in contemporary fiction, particularly in contemporary American fiction. And I don't know whether it's just a dialect thing that I'm just not used to, um, or yeah, I don't know what it is. But I read at least three, maybe four American new releases last year where repeatedly throughout the book, people say on accident, which really annoyed me, because it should be by accident, and maybe I'm being a bit of a pedant, but it should be by accident, accidentally, mistakenly, or something like that. And it could be just in certain cases a character's voice. That's how they'd say it. That's fair enough. But when I read, sort of four books where repeatedly it was coming up, and these four books had all been published within 6 months or so of each other, it I don't know, that did annoy me a bit. And so yeah, again, it might just be a dialect thing that I just haven't noticed or I'm not used to. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't annoy me. And then before I go, I've just got to tag some people, and I'll tag 5 people because, as I said, I really want to be nosy and see what other people find annoying. So I will tag Novella. I'll tag David Novak from the channel David Novak Reads Poetry. I will tag Grix from Grix etc., James from Quaint and Curious Volumes, and Kristen from Enter the Book. And there we go. So that was the I'm So Annoyed BookTube tag created by Kelly, and I was tagged by Will. So I'll have their videos below if you want to check them out. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.